What is up, my crew? This is the Nook Podcast, and my name is Stephen Murphy. This season that we have all been in with regard to the pandemic and everything associated with it has been examined and explained from so many different angles. Just me saying that may cause you to start thinking that you've already heard all of this. But hold on. In this episode, I've got an angle that you might not have considered. For months prior to the announcement of quarantine and general lockdowns in 2020, Gina Greathouse and his wife Gina had been in the planning stages of planting a new church in their hometown of Columbus, Ohio. To say that COVID messed up everything would probably be an understatement. While no one would have questioned Neil and Gina for deciding to call the whole thing off at that point, they chose to press in. Even with all of the craziness of a global health crisis, they knew that God had sent them back to Ohio for that specific time. Yes, they had to throw a lot of their plans out the window, but in doing so, they started to see so much more of God's plan being revealed in how this rather unconventional church plant was going to go. Neil has been a friend of mine for more than a decade now, and it's been so amazing to watch him navigate all of this. I believe that you will be as fascinated with this story as I am. So settle in for my conversation with Gina Greathouse. I can only imagine that you were in planning stages for Trademark Church long before February of 2020. When did that, is there a date that you could draw it back to as like, this is kind of when we got started on things?
Definitely. The previous year, we went to Israel for our second trip. We had taken a bunch of business leaders and pastors and, just marketplace executives and whatever over to Israel, and we're on a tour. And during that time, we didn't know what we were praying for. We knew we were praying for something. It's very cliche to tell you that the Lord spoke to us in the Holy Land, but
come on.
So
that's almost too perfect.
I know. I can't. So we had a friend of ours that said, Neil, I know you're trying to pray through a bunch of this stuff, and I just want you to know, I actually feel like you're not going to set foot on U.S. soil without God speaking to you. And I was like, well, zero pressure. You're giving me like 11 days to, and we knew we were praying for a few different things, but prior to that, my wife and I are not like this, I don't need anybody to prophesy to us, but it was like, we just really felt like God had just kept saying, it's time, you need to get ready. No, we didn't know what that meant. I mean, that's just very cryptic. I'm like, thanks, Lord.
Sure.
It's what time is it? And get ready for what? That would have been great.
And then the line goes dead.
Yeah. You're like, hello. So then later on, after that trip, when we were over there, we just felt like it was time to start looking at what would it look like to pastor a church. And we visited one time and just kind of prayed about it. And we were getting off the plane to get here, to spend 2 or 3 days just meeting with some old friends and just kind of just see the place. And I mean, I've coached people on how to do this, Steve, for years. Here's how you pray this through. Here's how you follow the Lord. Here's how you do that stuff. And then all of a sudden I realized, I was like, Gina, I have no idea how to do this. We are in the airport in Columbus when we landed here, and I'm calling my pastor like, hey, what exactly am I praying for here right now? Like, what does this mean? And it really came down to it. It was very simple. If God puts a burden for people on your heart, that's the thing that matters. People over anything else, people over location or salary or buildings or plans or any of that. It's always got to be people. And we just had about 2 or 3 days of just continually being around people that were so far away from God. And that's not how it always used to be. And something happened. I was like, what? Like, we sat down and had coffee with a guy that we pastored with for years. He's one of the kindest, most Christ-like people I've ever been around. And he hasn't set foot in a church for 3 years.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, all right. So then we start studying it and realize that it's kind of, I mean, it's not just here. I'd be naive to think that it was just here, but there are a lot of people that are just leaving church. It's not that they don't love the Lord. It's not that they're not even curious, or, I don't even want to suppose that they love God, but they still might believe in him, but they've left church.
Yeah.
And I thought, all right, this is when it hit us. We talk all the time about people who are lost. Hey, we want to win people for, Christ, and we want to go after lost people. And I always, it's like, there are people that we as the church have lost.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of people I want to go back and see if we can win them back. See if we can go just love them where they are and not expect anything of them. Not say, we need your gift back in the church. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear any of that. We just want to go and sit down and be a friend to them and talk to them and go wherever they are, instead of expecting us to come wherever we are.
Right.
And that was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And then everything changed.
Right. And that's exactly where I was going to pivot at this point, because I imagine that I take it back to February is where it seemed to at least start. That's when you kind of started announcing, wasn't it? Did those things, were they pretty much in the same timeline?
We announced January 1st. Our pastor had just asked us, don't say anything until a certain time. We knew that we had to finish up the school year with our kids. We jokingly told him, I said, we're not going to move you in the middle of the school year. I said, yes, listening to God and doing what he asks you to do is not always easy. It doesn't have to be torture. We're not going to torture you along the way. And so we were going to wait until the end of the school year. We started traveling from Arkansas to Columbus, Ohio, twice a month, driving and meeting with as many people as we possibly could over a 3-day time period, and then drive back. Wow. And then drive up and then drive back. So we started that January 1st and had done it twice in January, twice in February. And then I had a bunch of appointments scheduled in March. And I drove to Columbus, and every one of those appointments canceled on me. And I realized I probably need to turn back around and go home. And take a shower.
Yeah. And don't touch your face.
Yeah. Just scrub. Right. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It was definitely eye-opening. So it put a halt on everything. Well, on April 11th, actually the week before April 11th, it's Easter. And I had this idea. Remember how going all the way back, we all of a sudden felt like when we were in Israel, we felt like God was just saying, hey, it's time. Like, it's go time. Gina reminded me of that about a week before Easter in 2020. And she said, Neil, why couldn't we just do an Easter service? She goes, everybody else is digital. Like, every other church is shut down. We have this same opportunity to do this. And I was like, oh, it's go time. So we did our very first service from Arkansas, not in Columbus, and then we never stopped since then. So April 11th was not when our church was supposed to start, but it did, and we have not stopped since then.
So at what was that the point basically where you realized that you were kind of a preacher without a pulpit, and that you were going to have to do it unlike, any other plant maybe ever?
Yes, we knew. Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not the smartest guy out there. I didn't think we would be doing it this long. People kept saying, well, this will, after the first wave is done or whatever. So we said, if we can just make it through the summer, and if we can get closer to the fall, when it got closer and closer, so we started our church through the ARC, the Association of Related Churches. Everything that they have, Steve, everything. We have taught these classes for years. Every single thing they have teaches you launch as big as you possibly can. There are metrics and numbers on how to do it, what your numbers will be over the next 3 weeks. This is in their coaching. Don't even think about small groups for your first year, because you won't have time to focus on that. You need to get momentum and critical mass before you do those other things. And that's the track we were on. And all of a sudden I called them up and said, hey, you guys do know, and I hope you're okay with this, we're doing the exact opposite of everything you've ever taught us.
We just threw the model out the window.
Hold, yeah. If you want to talk amongst yourselves, you can. We're going to be right here, and it is because we couldn't have critical mass.
Oh yeah,
venues that we were going to be at. It's not that they said no to us; the state said no.
Well, and I guess that makes me curious. Does this has an in-person gathering? Is it even anything that you consider anymore? When
You mean like
you had yeah. Well, maybe not ever, but at least is it even in the back of your mind, or is that so far away that it's you concentrate all your efforts on that mobile idea?
Yeah, what I don't want to do, what you're telling somebody is that this is plan B.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And I don't know that they aren't, wherever they're at, whatever they're going through. They don't want somebody's second rate. This is our holding pattern for a while. So what we did is we took, because what we're doing is we're dangling a carrot in front of people saying, hey, we're eventually going to be able to do this. And it's a carrot that I don't have any control over.
Right.
So instead of that, just embrace where you are, like fully embrace. So we took it off the table entirely. In my mind, I don't think we will have an in-person gathering until September or later. I just don't see it. Our state has good guidelines, healthy, safe guidelines, but as the church, shouldn't we want people to be safe, like protecting them and helping people? Everybody's at a different spot. So I sent a poll out. Like, I don't love talking about what I think people think. I'd rather just know what they think, right, and then we can decide. And so I asked them, there was no one standout group of people like, hey, yes, we do want to get together. No, we don't. Hey, we'll get together when everybody has the vaccine. We'll get together when the cases are at this number. We'll get together when everybody wears masks. There was no one answer. And I realized, okay, then the only answer is to pastor people right where they are right now and stop saying eventually when we get to here, because it's like apologizing for where we are. And I'm not in an apology kind of a headspace right now.
Right.
My gut instinct is we can help people right here, right now, and be as personal and connected as they want to be. And it's less pressure. People have sent us messages and things that I don't think they would have ever done in person. And this isn't just Columbus, Steve. Now, I don't know about this part, but this is all over the U.S. and Canada. And we're not a big church. Nobody knows who we are. Nobody has any idea who we are. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we're praying for people that are in the Pacific Northwest and in, Southern California and right here in our state and all over the place. And we wouldn't have thought like that, because what we do is we're like, God, we're praying for our city. Maybe we should have prayed for something more. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Now, how do you pastor those people in an ongoing way? You could do it digitally for a while. Would it be great if there were in-person gatherings? Yes. But I think what we could do is eventually you could have some watch parties or some groups that you were in, even if you're not in the same city that we are in. And I think that'd be okay. Our goal would be eventually get you into a church. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But that's not an option right now. So, okay.
You make me think about something that I have pondered, and this actually goes back to one of our Marco Polos from months ago. Is this almost an indicator? That's, again, it's one of those tough things in making an assumption. But is this an indicator of where we, the church, the Big C church, are? In that, at some point, the model that we've always known, that one guy talking at a podium to an audience of 200 or 2,000, is that model already past its effectiveness? I mean, and I'm not saying that we don't need good teaching. I know I need good teaching and always will. But has that model worn itself out and the church is well past the point of acknowledging it, but you're having to live it? Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, sir. Is it past due? I think we're actually way past that, but because we have been celebrating the gatherings and not the engagement, we have been celebrating. So what we celebrate grows. Could we go for engagement as opposed to gathering people in a location? Because if you have engaged people, isn't that the ultimate win? Like I can't. So what happened is, you get, man, we had this many people. I told a guy the other day, I said, COVID has done two things, and both of them are kind of revolutionary. The first one is, gone are the days where you can sit in the back of the room with a clicker and measure a church's effectiveness based off of the heads that are in the room. That's gone.
Yep.
The other thing that it has done is it has stripped ego out of the American Western church, because we can't brag about the things that we used to brag about that gave us a little bit of status. Right now, what we really should be focusing on, which maybe we should have always done, and I'm guilty of it as well, is really dedicated followers of Christ, like people who are actually engaged in it, that are learning. I've got a guy, I'm whispering now because he's in this. So we're in a co-work space.
Okay.
And he has an office. He's across the hall. He doesn't know what we do. We've never told anyone in this space except for the owners what we do. I'm very subversive. I would rather you are curious and want to know, instead of me being there going, hey guys, here's my card. Here's my QR code, whatever you want. I mean, whatever. So he came over and he asked us what we're doing. And he goes, what do you, I'm not going to do his voice. He was so loud about it. He goes, what are you doing? And we told him what it was. And he goes, the thing that I never liked about the church, he goes, I feel like they always assume that I should know all this other stuff. He goes, nobody's ever treated me well right where I'm at, where I'm learning. And I don't know that much. He goes, so I always feel like I'm showing up to something where everybody knows more than I do. And he said, it's very discouraging. So I don't want to do it. And I was like, if we could give people, nobody gets on the ride to the same spot.
Yeah.
This is not a linear path. This is, you would jump on at some point. We have to be able to take people on a journey. And that's what it is. Jesus didn't say, hey, come over here because we're having a church service. He was walking from town to town. He was living life in front of people. He said, follow me, because he was going somewhere. That's what I really believe we should be doing, instead of building something that people have to come to experience. Now, I'm not speaking against a gathering. I think they're amazing. I miss worship more than anybody, because if you've ever heard me sing, you need to know we have to have really loud music so I can't hear myself and no one else can hear myself. It's bad, but I miss it. I miss it so much. But I wonder if we could learn something in where we are right now and stop saying, man, I can't wait till things go back to the way they were. I don't want them to.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Well, and I think normal, what we know as normal is a place that doesn't exist anymore. However, that eventually shakes out. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about specifically, because I remember just as things were really starting to blow up, and because I have followed you, if only on the social medias, in our geographic distance,
Right.
And just having my heart go out to you, I was like, oh my gosh, Neil was running headlong into planting a church, and now this. But as I watched what you started to do with video, I thought, oh God, you are amazing. Because how long did I tell you, oh Neil, I wish you could do a daily vlog? And your answer would always be so sheepish and say, no, nobody needs to see that. The videos that you and Tyler were making were so good, and maybe it's just my own ADD why I loved them so much, because it's like, oh my gosh, this will pull me in every time. That you guys could be clowning around, jump cuts, fun music, and then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, you're both are sitting on a bench eating a hamburger, but telling me some amazing thing and sharing Philippians 4:7 or something, that I'm just like, I just got so much out of that. And I was so glad that you did it. And then I see at Easter how you started the service and what you've done since then. It's like, wow, God was preparing them. God was preparing you to do this exact thing. And you probably, obviously, I think that's not an assumption. You had no idea how this was going to play out, but how cool that you could pivot like that as quick as you had to.
Yeah. When we did NLC Live, without Tyler, it's zero fun. Who picks up and goes bowling in the middle of the day and goes to an arcade and can figure out how to make that a devotional. It was incredibly, what I didn't realize, it was a privilege to be able to do it when we did it. And it was also frustrating when we had to pull the plug on it.
Yeah.
Because what most churches do is they say, that's great, but we don't have to do that right now. We've got these rooms full of people. And so we pulled the plug on it, and we're asked to, and we gladly did it and have no problem with that. I never could settle it in my gut on why, like, not why did the plug get pulled, but why did we do that? Yeah. And I had no idea that it was a laboratory before we got to this. And so what we inevitably were able to do is we were able to help New Life Church get ready for this stage, because they've got an entire digital team that is doing the same thing now. And it helps Trademark Church get ready for it. And so God definitely knows what he's doing. There are a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do this. There's so many excuses. There's so many, like, well, it doesn't, somebody else has already said or whatever. Nope. I'm just telling you, it's worth it. It seems risky until you get out there and start doing it. It is a lot of work. Like, this is not the easy route.
Nope.
I talked with a guy earlier this week, and he said, leaving the South and going back to Columbus to try and start a church, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, he's going to do great. He goes, you might not do great. It's very difficult there. I was like, well, thank you. Thank you. I don't know. I'm not really sure, because it's not the easiest thing in the world, but the work that goes into it and the visuals that come out of it and the ability that we have, the messages that we are putting here on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, they'll be around for 400 years. The once in a lifetime opportunities are happening in auditoriums are great, but if you don't capture it, if you don't really get that out there, so I do believe in having experiences and encounters and these moments and things like that. But I also think you can do it outside and show people wherever you're at. And for right now, that's what we got. That's what we have to do.
To say that I'm proud to call Gina Greathouse a friend is an understatement. I have been around quite a few church planters in the past 10, 15 years, and I am always amazed at the heart that is required for such an endeavor. And that's when all things are normal. Add a global pandemic to the mix, and there is no playbook for that. And yet Neil and Gina are just motoring on, and I think it's awesome. Somewhere in the middle of that interview, I mentioned some videos that Neil had a hand in when he was at New Life Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. I had to include a link to one of those in the show notes because you've got to see one. They were always so good. Which leads me to the takeaways from this episode. The first one being that you never know what God is preparing you for right now. Something that may seem random or even boring at times. Somewhere down the road, it will make so much sense. You'll have an aha moment and realize that once again, God knew what he was doing the entire time. And I just love how that played out here, that all that stuff that Neil was doing with video years ago is playing out so perfectly in this very unique church plant that he is in the middle of now. My second takeaway is that COVID is teaching us that we can't keep doing things the way that we always have. We can't just invite people to something at our church. We really have to live this thing we call faith for it to ever have any appeal to others. I've got links to Neil's church down in the show notes. They are really doing some amazing things to engage people on a daily basis. I've also got a link to the Nook Facebook page. Please drop a like there and follow along. And as always, feel free to direct any questions or comments about this or any of the other episodes directly to me. My email address is steven@nookpodcast.com. That's Steven with a V at nookpodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook. The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.